From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet. We're coming to you live from the CCRS studios. WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome, fellow patriots, and welcome once again to the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you live from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, Rebooting Liberty Radio, AM/FM 24/7, and a whole bunch of others. And joining me today as my co-host is the Patriot from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the president and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom, and that is George Landreth. George, welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show, continuation of Frontiers of Freedom, Hour of Action. But, George, I want to thank you for sitting in today for Anna Little.
Absolutely. I am pleased to do it. It is always fun. I have to be honest. Every time I do this show, I feel like I blink and the show is over. So I've got toothpicks in my eyes. I'm going to try to make sure I don't blink.
Well, I hope you're not tired. I know you're snowed in down there in Virginia.
Tired.
You've been shoveling.
I did not mean that to suggest that I'm bored. I just mean that, like, I blink and time. So I've got to stop blinking because I blink and the show's over.
Yeah,
and amazing. I think just because I enjoy talking politics and I enjoy this is stuff I'm passionate about. I don't know if the listeners can tell that I'm passionate about these topics, but I've been a passionate conservative my whole life. This is something that matters to me. This isn't like fun for me. Like just this is like watching my team play a game and I'm rooting for my team. This is stuff that matters. This is like a question of whether or not we're going to enjoy liberty, freedom, and opportunity now and going forward for our children or not. As Ronald Reagan said, we are never more than a generation away from extinction in terms of freedom and opportunity. And it doesn't pass from one generation to another through DNA or through blood. Mm-hmm. Something that we have to be willing to argue for and fight for and protect. And we can give it to our children, but it will not be through our bloodstream or DNA. It's going to be through our hard work. And so to me, this stuff matters because I feel fortunate. In 1776, there were leaders who made a decision to take on the most powerful superpower, the only superpower on the planet of its time, and say, we want freedom. And they did that at great personal cost. I don't have to do that. I just need to advocate. And so in my way, I can fight for freedom, but I don't have to do it with bullets or musket balls, and I don't have to get shot at literally. I can do it through advocacy and conversation and trying to be convincing. So to me, this is all pretty important stuff, and I feel passionate about it. I feel because this matters. This is like my children's future, my grandchildren's future.
Mm-hmm. Hey, George,
that's why you're in on it too.
Yeah, well, why am I in on it? It's why am I in on it? Because I believe, like John Adams believed, that we need leaders that will put our country ahead of party politics and personal gain. I love our country, and I love the story of our country and the creation of it. I love the story of our founding fathers and our revolution. And I see people that are taking us in the opposite direction from what our founding fathers created. And I would like to try to stop that. That's why I do what I do. I don't have children. I don't have grandchildren. Neither does my wife. So it's not like I'm, trying to save the country for my kids. I'm not. I'm trying to save the country in respect for what the Founding Fathers created. I'm trying to save the country for what I think are the right things to do, the right things to think, the right ways to act. Call me crazy.
You want to give to the next generation what you enjoyed.
Well, I think we owe a debt of gratitude, not just to our founding fathers, but to everyone that has made America as great as it is. This is a wonderful place. George, where else would anyone want to live other than in the United States? This is the greatest country on God's blue-green planet. Why anyone would want to change it, why anyone would want to get away from the principles that have made it what it is, I do not understand.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I feel a great debt of gratitude, not just to the Founding Fathers, but to every succeeding generation who made that choice to pass on to the next generation freedom and liberty. And one of my concerns is that this generation is letting the next generation down, because we're not, if you just look by what Barack Obama has accomplished, we're not doing a very good job. And I hope that we can redeem ourselves, because I do not want to be the first generation to break the chain that was started in 1776. It's a great legacy.
It is.
And to pass it on.
You know, George, in many ways, it's like the creation of this country happened when all the stars and all the planets lined up perfectly. You know, everything. If you read or hear or see documentaries about the creation of our country, in my opinion, it was a miracle. There were so many times, so many places where the Revolutionary War could have been lost. Give you an example. During the Battle of Brandywine, not far from here, not far from our studio, there was a soldier by the name of Patrick Fraser who invented a new rifle, a very accurate rifle, much better than the Brown Bess muskets the British Army was using. But at that time, there was a code of ethics in the British Army that you didn't shoot an officer of the opposing army. So during the Battle of Brandywine, there was a Continental soldier that rode into the sights of Patrick Ferguson, and he drew down the sights of his weapon, his rifle, on this soldier that was mounted on a horse. He realized at that point that this was an officer of the Continental Army. He did not fire that weapon at that officer because of this, as I was saying, code of ethics. That officer, who was less than 100 yards from Patrick Ferguson, was George Washington. Could that have been divine intervention, George? I don't know. But George Washington was in his sights. Patrick Ferguson said he was a perfect target. That shot was never fired. Our revolution could have been ended right at that time. At the battle in New York, the Battle of Brooklyn, in the early parts of the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army had its backs up against, I think it's the East River that connects Brooklyn from New York, or separates Brooklyn from New York. The British Army had the entire Continental Army trapped right there on the banks in Brooklyn. They decided to wait till the next day to press that attack. That night, Washington ferried his entire army across the river. In the morning, the army still wasn't across, but a fog set in that permitted the Continental Army to escape from Brooklyn. Could that have been divine intervention, George Landreth? I don't know. But these are just a couple of examples of what could have, minor things in history. If it had went one way instead of the other, we might not be the United States of America today. And the story of our country, the creation of our country, I love the Founding Fathers. We are deeply indebted to them. I believe as part of that indebtedness that we should do whatever we can to save our country in the mold of what our Founding Fathers created. That's why I do what I do. Anyway, went a little long with that. I apologize.
There's a quote by John Adams. He said, "I always consider the settlement of America with reverence and wonder as the opening of a grand scene and design in providence for the illumination of the ignorant and the emancipation of the slavish part of mankind all over the earth." And all I can say is I totally agree with John Adams.
Hey, George, with that, we'll go to a break, and you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network, WNJC 1360 in Philly, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, Rebooting Liberty Radio, AM, FM 24/7. Today's show is brought to you by the First Amendment, protected by the Second. Don't go away. George and I will be right back.
I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Biden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader. For rebroadcasts of our shows, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com, or mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. Log on to leadingedgeradionetwork.com at 1 p.m., roarradio.net, or at 9 p.m. Eastern, log on to highplainsdailynews.com. You could also hear our show any time of the day from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. George, we have a couple of great guests joining us today, and joining us in the 3:30 half hour will be Robert Knight. He's a senior fellow for the American Civil Rights Union and a Washington Times contributor. And he has written an article, Silence of the Lambs, and it's about the American Civil Liberties Union and how they're shutting us all up to infringe upon our First Amendment rights. And George, I believe you have the 4:30 guest today.
Absolutely. I've got Gabby Morangelo. She is a political reporter with the Washington Examiner. For those of you outside the D.C. area, you may not realize the Washington Examiner is one of the conservative online newspapers that sprung up that's doing a great job of giving folks on the right reliable investigative reporting, and she's involved in that endeavor. She, of course, previously was a reporter at Campus Reform, which is an organization that used to try to hold the liberal educational academic elite accountable. So anyhow, she will be our guest. She's written an article on what's going on in New Hampshire. She's going to give us an update on, as we've been talking about Trump, he's been doing very well in New Hampshire. She's going to talk a little about how he's doing well there and kind of why and what all that different kind of stuff. So she'll kind of get us up to date on, what's happening on the ground in some of the important early primary states. So it should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I should say, we in the previous hour we talked a little about Trump, and you didn't mention this, but you probably should have. You should have said something about, you're listening to, and then introduced yourself and me, and then said, two stupid losers. Because after the last hour, that's what we will be called, of course. We're just, we're stupid losers.
Well,
because,
George, they're probably somebody, while we were talking during the last hour, during Frontiers of Freedom Hour of Action, there has been some very fast conversation going on my Facebook page, some things that I posted about things that we're talking about. And George, I see nothing wrong with the exchange of ideas coming from both sides, because this is how we learn. Exchanges of ideas are good things. Where I don't want anything to go is when it gets personal between individuals saying, you're a stupid loser because you believe this way or you feel that way. You don't gain anything. You don't learn anything from that. For me, as I said, my concern is, and I won't rehash what I said about my feelings about our country, but I want people to learn and to understand and to open their eyes. Once they understand the facts, once they have the knowledge, once they have their eyes open, they can vote for whoever they want to. It's their decision. But I do believe it's important that everyone has all the facts. Facts are a good thing.
I agree with that. One of the things that is interesting is this whole, and I, from a purely Machiavellian perspective, I think Donald Trump's been fairly smart. He attacks viciously anybody that says anything he doesn't like, be they a reporter or other folks. And he does that so that he can dissuade people from attacking him in the future. He's very thin-skinned, and he doesn't like people saying bad things about him, or quite frankly, what he thinks are bad things. He doesn't want to hear you tell him things he said in the past as opposed to what he says now. He doesn't want to hear that. He wants to shut you up. So he tries to bully people, and so he attacks them. And I would argue, I had some friends who thought that his attacks on Megyn Kelly were fine, her question was inappropriate. I'm here to tell you, her questions were fine. If I were him, I would have been grateful for that question, because I would have been smart enough to answer it properly. This is how you answer a question about, you used to tweet all kinds of terrible things about women, and now you're running for president. How do you answer that? You want to get those difficult questions out of the way early. And so what I would have said is, you're absolutely right, Megyn. I was an entertainer. I'm on a TV show. I'm trying to promote my TV show. You had like Muhammad Ali, when he would promote his fights, he talked about, I'm the greatest. I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, that kind of stuff. That's the persona of a promoter. But I'm running for president now, and you're going to see a very different person. You're going to see the real Donald Trump. And I will not be disrespectful of women, and I will not call them stupid, and I will not talk about how they look. I'm going to talk about the issues. I'm going to tell you why you should vote for me and how I'm going to help make America great again. And so I appreciate that question, because it's important for people to understand the context of why those things were said. Now, instead, what he said was, listen, you stupid bimbo, how dare you ask me that question? I don't call women names, and I don't do bad things to women. And then
right after he called her a bimbo, right?
Right. I mean, I know he didn't actually use that word, but that was effectively his answer. It was the stupidest answer ever. And all of the Trump people were like, oh, well, shit, that was an out-of-bounds question. The reality is, it was a fair question. He has said those things. He needed to explain to people why. There was a good explanation. He just failed to give it. So a question isn't a good question or a bad question, depending on whether your guy gives a good answer back. A good question is a fair, reasonable question. And a good candidate who's not an idiot can give a good answer. But if you listen to Donald Trump, he never says anything. He repeats himself over and over again. He says almost nothing, and he just gives us platitudes. I feel like I'm listening to Hope and Change all over again. So my point is, it's fine. I understand. I am now forever. If Donald Trump ever decides to listen to anything I've said about him, he'll come up for some reason why I'm a loser and why I'm stupid. And the answer to the question is, I would debate Donald Trump on any topic. I would be willing to debate him on how to manage hotels, because he's simply not very good on his feet. People talk about how he wins debates. Darned if I can tell how he wins debates. He just calls people names and says stupid stuff and then repeats platitudes. He is not, that's why I don't want him as my nominee for a variety of reasons. One is he's not a conservative, but the other one is he's not going to represent us well. He's going to make us look like morons, and I don't want to look like a moron, because I think that Mr. McCain made us look stupid. I think Bob Dole made us look stupid. I think that George Bush in 1992 made us look a little foolish, too.
I think Mitt Romney made us look stupid.
Smart again. Yeah, I want to look smart again. I want to look like we looked when we had people like Ronald Reagan.
Hey, George, I want to make a quick comment about everything you just said. We're coming up against the break. I agree with you, George. If he came out and said those things about, I'm an entertainer, I was doing this for television, people love honesty. They would have accepted that. The other thing, George, you ought to go to work for Donald Trump. You would make a better case for his point than he's making. But with that, you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network, WNJC 1360 in Philly, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, Rebooting Liberty Radio, AM FM 24/7. Don't go away. On the other side, we're going to be speaking with our good friend Robert Knight from the American Civil Rights Union and the Washington Times. Be right back.
I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
You've heard Paul Deltz playing the music on the Your Music Matters morning show. He is also an experienced mortgage loan officer working for U.S. Mortgage Corporation and assists homeowners navigate the reverse mortgage process. If you are finding yourself asking questions whether or not you set aside enough for retirement, Paul can sit down with you, your family, and your financial advisor and discuss how a reverse mortgage may be a valuable resource for your retirement plan. You will be responsible for paying your taxes and insurance, and the reverse mortgage can help with this and other expenses, such as home health care or other untimely bills. Put Paul's 20-plus years of of experience to work for you, as choosing the right option for your situation can be critical. Call Paul at U.S. Mortgage Corporation at 877-213-9977. That's 877-213-9977. Or go to seniormatters.info for more information. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is a licensed mortgage banker in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, and an equal housing lender. NMLS number 3901. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is located at 201 Old Country Road, Suite 140, Melville, New York, 11747. This advertisement applies to first lien mortgages. Paul E. Dilks, NMLS is 485904.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Biden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glassboro, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired, as I am, about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos Radio Network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos Radio Show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos Radio Show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader. And for rebroadcasts of our shows, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com, or mornings at 9 a.m. Log on to leadingedgeradionetwork.com. At 1 p.m., roarradio.net. At 6 p.m., highplainsdailynews.com. Or you can hear our show any time of the day from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. Our next guest, or our first guest of the day, is Robert Knight. He's a senior fellow for the American Civil Rights Union and a Washington Times contributor. His experience includes 7 years as editor and writer for the Los Angeles Times, a regular weekly columnist at the Washington Times, townhall.com, and onenewsnow.com. Robert is a media fellow was a media fellow at the Hoover Institute, and he held senior positions with the Heritage Foundation, the Family Research Council, Concerned Women for America. I can go on, but wanted to save time for the interview. Robert, welcome back to Conservative Commandos radio show.
Oh, good to be back on with you, Rick.
Always appreciate you, Robert. And interesting title of your latest piece is here in the Washington Times, Silence of the Lambs. And you're right here in George Orwell's novel, 1984, the totalitarian Big Brother regime issues perverse edicts reflecting that the opposite of what is said. And you kind of equate this with the American Civil Liberties Union, that to them silence is freedom of speech. Could you explain this to me, Robert?
Yeah, I started out with what Big Brother says in 1984. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and they impose these untruths on the helpless populace. Mm-hmm. In Monroeville, Pennsylvania, which is a Pittsburgh suburb, they just recently tabled a motion to have faith leaders give prayers before the city council meetings. Previously, they'd had somebody recite the Lord's Prayer, and a guy came and wanted prayer said for Rosh Hashanah in September, and somehow they botched it. They didn't let the guy do it, and they should have, I think. But in any case, it caused a uproar, and he went to the ACLU and said, well, this is an outrage, and we don't want an establishment of religion. So the ministerium, which is a group of faith leaders in Monroeville, came up with the idea of just having a moment of silence, having no more prayers. And so the ACLU, which had threatened a lawsuit, was very happy. And the ACLU attorney, Sarah Rose, said, we think silence is the most inclusive option. It allows everyone to pray or not pray. Which is, think of that. There's defenders of freedom of speech saying silence is what we really need here. And so that's why I'm having a little fun with it.
Well, Robert, whenever I see issues like this or hear of issues like this, I like to think back on what would our founding fathers say about this. Now, our founding fathers never started a meeting without a prayer. Many of their meetings took places in churches in colonial Philadelphia. And the fact that we've got this group now, the American Civil Liberties Union, that is trying to shut down that tradition, that honor to God, makes you shake your head, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, especially, here's another example I cite in my column, and that's in Haddon Heights, New Jersey.
Which is right in our listening area, by the way.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the kids at Glenview Elementary, or Glenview Middle School, had been saying, God bless America after the Pledge of Allegiance since the 9/11 attacks back in 2001 as a way of honoring the first responders and also the victims of the attacks. And they'd been going along fine until someone complained. The ACLU stepped in and said, you can't do this. And so they decided to just do away with it because they said we can't afford the legal bills that the ACLU would inflict on us. And I'm thinking, well, the ACLU representative was quoted as saying, there's no room for religion anywhere in government of any kind. Mm-hmm. It said, in fact, he said, let's see, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits the government not only from favoring one religion over another, but also from promoting religion over non-religion. And I say that would be news to Ben Franklin.
It would be news to all our founding fathers.
All the founding fathers, including the deists, and even the non-believers who still saw, prayer as a useful thing. Even though they didn't believe, they thought a virtuous people needed prayer. But Franklin stepped in when the Constitutional Convention was bound up and wasn't getting anywhere in 1787, and he very famously said, "I've lived a long time, sir, a long time. The longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth that God governs in the affairs of men, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We've been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it." So he called for prayer, and suddenly the frozen-up Constitutional Convention came unfrozen, and they went ahead and passed it. And I'm thinking, there's the ACLU saying, well, there's no place for religion of any kind, even a mention of God, even something as benign as God bless America, that every president has said, up to and including Barack Obama. But these kids aren't allowed to say it because somehow it establishes religion. It's a total misreading of our history. It's an establishment of atheism as our official religion, and that's really what they're aiming at. If you silence everybody and say you can never have any reference to our religious heritage or even the ongoing faiths of millions of Americans, then you've established atheism as the official religion.
Robert, I think a question that I might have that I think you alluded to the answer is, how does the ACLU get away with this all the time? And you mentioned a very key word, legal costs.
Yeah, they just scare people. They do this all the time. They before Christmas, they usually send out a letter warning school districts, boy, you better not mention Christmas. You better not have a Christmas pageant. You better not have Christmas music. You can have holiday music. And they warn city councils about prayer. They rip out the Ten Commandments. I mean, they're on a full-scale war against any reference to God in public life. And, if they succeed, they'll leave us in the position that the Russian people were in when the Soviet Union was around. And in the few churches they didn't burn down, they said, well, you can practice your religion, your freedom of worship, behind those closed doors. God help you if you take it out into the public square and minister to people, share your faith, do any charity work. No, we're making you totally irrelevant. But you have the freedom in the space between your ears to think all you want about God, but you just can't say anything. And if you do, keep it behind closed doors, will you? I mean, that's the future the ACLU is planning for us.
Hey, Robert, we have to take a quick break. Could you hold on for us for just 2 minutes, please?
Sure.
And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360 AM in Philadelphia and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, Rebooting Liberty Radio, and AM/FM 24/7. Our guest this segment is Robert Knight. He's a senior fellow for the American Civil Rights Union, not to be confused with the American Civil Liberties Union. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They say I'm nasty, but
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Biden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. And for rebroadcasts of our shows, check out our websites, ccrshownetwork.com or CCRSnetwork.com, or mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. Log on to Leading Edge Radio Network at 1 p.m., roarradio.net. At 9 p.m., log on to HighPlainsDailyNews.com. Could also hear our show from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. Our guest this segment is Robert Knight. He's a senior fellow for the American Civil Rights Union and a Washington Times columnist. Robert, thanks for holding through that break. We appreciate your time.
Oh, no problem, Rick. By the way, I looked it up. It was Glenview Elementary School, not middle school.
By the way, I've been to that school. In something I used to do in the past, I did assemblies for kids, and I've actually had the opportunity to visit that particular school.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned something in your article and about in Monroe. It says here, as for Monroeville, and you mentioned this, the January 12th meeting when the council caved in. The mayor said he was not thrilled, but in the face of a lawsuit, I don't want to make the ACLU any richer. Robert Knight, the ACLU might not be getting any richer by getting into a lawsuit fight with the Monroe, Pennsylvania town council, but America is getting poorer every time, in my opinion. I wanted to get yours. Every time they do this, America is getting poorer. Can't have a Christmas concert anymore. And in a lot of schools, they're even afraid to have holiday concerts with Christian, Christmas, or religious music. Oh, that's a big no-no. Yeah, are we getting poorer as a country because of what the American Civil Liberties Union is doing?
Well, the canon of Christmas music is some of the finest music ever composed. So when they can't even play that, yeah, we're losing our heritage, and we're losing our freedom to take the best of our heritage and put it out there, all in the name of creating an official atheism. You know, one other thing I mentioned in my column was that I said that they appear to be suffering from the Stockholm Syndrome,
right.
Monroeville. And, of course, that's a reference to the time in 1973 when a bunch of criminals came into a bank in Stockholm, Sweden, took people hostage, and the police laid siege for 6 days. And meanwhile, the hostages began identifying with their captors and even liking them and defending them afterwards. And so when you have captives identifying with their captors, it's called the Stockholm Syndrome. I said, well, there's evidence of that in Monroeville, because the very interfaith group representing numerous religious bodies in the community, actually came up with the idea of silencing everything and just having a moment of silence. In fact, here's a quote from Temple David Rabbi Barbara Simons, who heads the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium. Quote, "We feel that we spoke of and modeled diversity of religions within Monroeville, and the council was able to hear that. We think this is a vote for the strength of Monroeville." So think about that. The ACLU comes in, bullies everybody. They say, okay, well, best we can do is silence. So, this is great. It shows our strength. To me, that's Stockholm Syndrome.
Here on the Conservative Commandos radio show, we are speaking with Robert Knight. He is with the American Civil Rights Union and a Washington Times contributor. Hey, Robert, on the other line, I do have my friend and co-host, George Landreth, with us. And, George, I think part of the problem here lies with what is not right or wrong, what is not constitutional or unconstitutional, but the fact that it gets so expensive to defend yourself or your views in the courts of law today that groups like ACLU get to bully town councils, get to bully schools, get to bully organizations. Maybe it's time that we need something called lawsuit tort reform, so they can bring their suits, but if they lose, they have to pay.
They should take some risk for what they're doing. George, you want to comment before I go into this?
Well, I think you should go into that, but I would just say that the primary people who oppose tort reform are the left.
Hey, George, you know what? George, sorry to interrupt. Can you call back in? For some reason, your line went really bad. I'll let Robert comment on what I just said, and hopefully by then you'll call us back in. All right, George? Yeah, Robert, I think...
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was having difficulty hearing him.
Yeah.
But your point is that, they're impoverishing us all by doing this. It's ripping out our culture. It's ripping out our roots, basically. And you can't grow anything good without roots. And it's the ACLU bullying people, but they're not the only ones. There's the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's a huge organization based in Alabama that used to go after hate groups and now characterizes anybody who disagrees with the sexual revolution as a hate group. I mean, they've got the Family Research Council on their list of hate groups. I used to work there for 10 years. That's a Christian organization that advances biblical concepts of public policy. A lot of good people there. And, of course, because of their place on the hate group list, some nutcase tried to take him out, shot the security guard, and planned mass murder of the staff, and cited the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map as his impetus for doing so. And do you think they took off Family Research Council from that hate map? They sure didn't. I believe you can access it today. I haven't tried today, but recently I did, and there it was, with a picture of a guy in a Nazi helmet. I mean, this is outrageous. But these guys have deep pockets. Southern Poverty Law Center has close to $300 million.
Wow.
And the ACLU has thousands of attorneys who are affiliated. So no wonder when they come in and threaten, a city, the lawyer for the city says, my gosh, I'm not sure you want to do this, folks. This could drag on for years. It could drain the taxpayers' pockets. So they cave immediately. What they should do is contact one of these organizations that is a real civil liberties organization, like Liberty Institute or ACLJ or Alliance Defending Freedom. These people will defend attacks on religious liberty at no charge. And I wish more of the city officials would take advantage of that.
I do, too. Here on the Conservative Commandos radio show, we are speaking with Robert Knight. And Robert, I think we have George back with us. George, you back with us?
I am. Do I sound any better now?
Much better. Good. Yes, sir.
Good. Well, Robert, you've made some really good points, but I think one of the things that we have to look at here is also just the lack of education that we seem to exist about what the Constitution means. The idea that silence would somehow be what the First Amendment demands is amazing. I mean, in the Soviet Union, that's probably the argument they use is, well, we should have silence here. We shouldn't be. We could demand that silence when it comes to political matters. I mean, after all, politics is very divisive. Lots of arguments take place on Facebook and all this, and it's really kind of gets people up in an uproar, and silence might be our best approach. It just strikes me as a very dangerous concept when freedom is based on the idea of people being able to communicate, talk, argue, settle arguments, convince, sometimes not convince, but the idea is it's a marketplace of ideas. Silence is not a marketplace of ideas. Silence is making ideas an illegal marketplace.
Yeah, it is. And they're passing it off as something good and positive. You know, they're saying it preserves diversity. I mean, no, it crushes diversity.
Right.
They want us all to sound alike, which is to just pretend we're all atheists.
Well, the Soviet Union had that program to respect diversity, silence.
Yeah, freedom of worship, too. You know, President Obama's been using that term, freedom of worship, instead of freedom of religion. Well, you can just worship inside your head. You know, you could be...
Right.
You could be you could be in a prison cell somewhere, but oh boy, you can worship inside your head. I mean, that's not freedom.
Right. It's amazing to me, the idea that you have the right to exercise religion if you can do it in the closet of your bedroom where no one else can hear you or see you. We've gotten to the point now where on college campuses, being confronted with ideas that you disagree with is an offense, and therefore makes the First Amendment a bad idea. To me, all such schools that have allowed that idea to propagate need to be, essentially, they should lose their accreditation. These aren't real schools. If they're teaching that, they're not real schools.
No, colleges were formed for inquiry, for learning and teaching people to think and fearless inquiry, but now they're just becoming indoctrination centers where only leftist views are permitted. Everything else is crushed in the name of diversity. You know, we get back to Big Brother. You know, war is peace. Ignorance is strength, or whatever. They do the opposite of what they say they're doing, and then they try to make you believe it. Sued them. Nobody dares sue them. They have such deep pockets. Same with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Somebody ought to sue them, but that. Yeah. How the Viet Cong beat us in Vietnam. We got tired of it. We didn't want to spend any more money. We had won the war, basically, driven the North Vietnamese out, pacified the Viet Cong, and then as soon as we left, Congress, run by the Democrats, said, no, we're not going to give them any more money or equipment to defend themselves. So the communists came right in and took over. But it was the war of attrition that won it, because they just wore us down eventually. Thanks for having me on, Rick. I always enjoy the conservative Commandos as well. Well, they can go to theacru.org. That's theacru.org. They can also go to WashingtonTimes.com and look up my columns. Just put me in the search engine. Or townhall.com or One News Now. Do a column a week for all of them.
Sorry, Robert, my mic was off. I want to apologize to our audience, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. See ya.
And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. Maybe it's good sometimes when my mic is on. And we're coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. And if you'd like to hear rebroadcast, check out our website, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com. Don't go away. George and I will be right back.
They say I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
You've heard Paul Delks playing the music on the Your Music Matters morning show. He is also an experienced mortgage loan officer working for U.S. Mortgage Corporation and assists homeowners navigate the reverse mortgage process. If you are finding yourself asking questions whether or not you set aside enough for retirement, Paul can sit down with you, your family, and your financial advisor and discuss how a reverse mortgage may be a valuable resource for your retirement plan. You will be responsible for paying your taxes and insurance, and the reverse mortgage can help with this and other expenses, such as home health care or other untimely bills. Put Paul's 20-plus years of experience to work for you, as choosing the right option for your situation can be critical. Call Paul at U.S. Mortgage Corporation at 877-213-9977. That's 877-213-9977. Or go to seniormatters.info for more information. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is a licensed mortgage banker in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, and an equal housing lender. NMLS number 3901. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is located at 201 Old Country Road, Suite 140, Melville, New York, 11747. This advertisement applies to first lien mortgages. Paul E. Dilks, NMLS is 485904.
Hi, this is Bob Viden, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired as I am about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos Radio Network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show. with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. And for rebroadcast of our shows, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com. Mornings at 9 a.m., log on to leadingedgeradionetwork.com. At 1 p.m., roarradio.net. At 9 p.m., highplainsdailynews.com. You can also hear our show from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. George, I've shared with you a very interesting article. It's done by Robert Reich. He's the former Secretary of Labor during the Clinton administration. Bob Reich, as Rush always used to refer to him. And right now he is professor of public policy at the University of California at Berkeley. He is supporting Bernie Sanders for president. He says he's known Hillary since she was 19 and that Bernie would be the best person to be president, in his opinion. That's interesting, coming from somebody who used to be a part of the Bill Clinton administration. And you know, George, I always wonder, when Democrats try to give advice to Republicans about something, an issue or a candidate, and I'm thinking, why do they want to give advice to their opponents? I never quite got that. But he has written this article, and this article is 5 reasons Ted Cruz is even more dangerous than Donald Trump. And I thought this would be interesting fodder for our cannons. And George, I'm going to let you take the lead on this. Let's go down these 5 reasons from Robert Reich why Ted Cruz is more dangerous than Donald Trump. Let's talk about the issues, then discuss them, all right?
Sure. So the first one is that Ted Cruz is more fanatical. Mm-hmm. He says, do you want to just run through the 5 real quick and then come back?
No, let's do them one at a time. Yeah, so
he starts off by telling us that Ted Cruz is more fanatical. He notes that Trump is a bully, but that he doesn't have any sharp ideological lines, but that Cruz, of course, is fiercely ideological. And he tells us all the things that makes him so dangerous. He questions the idea that man-made climate change is some cataclysmic, terrible event. He supports traditional marriage. He believes the IRS is abusive and that needs to be abolished. And he supports the Second Amendment and believes that it gives and guarantees, doesn't give, but guarantees you the right to guns. So those are some of the things that makes him. He favors the death penalty. He it's interesting. He rejects immigration reform. Anyhow, it's just kind of interesting that he demands repeal of Obamacare. All these things that make him so dangerous and terrible are all the reasons that I'm looking for a candidate who will do these things.
Yeah, and
if those are on my checklist for my choice of candidates. I think Ted Cruz. I think there's maybe one or two others that might meet some of these tests too. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, I find it interesting that Robert Reich is pretty much all the things that he hates about this candidate seem to be the things that make him attractive to me.
And when you think about where Robert Reich comes from, a supporter of Bernie Sanders, former Labor Secretary under Bill Clinton, a big-time liberal, right now is out in Berkeley. I mean, you can't think, is there a more liberal place in the world than being in Berkeley, University of California? So,
I think I don't think you're pronouncing it correctly. You keep saying Berkeley, but when I had some friends who went there that we interned together at a law firm out in California, and they always referred to it as Berkeley. Why do you say Berkeley?
Call me stupid. I make enough mistakes here on the side of the mic. I don't want to...
You were pronouncing it phonetically, but it's one of those weird exceptions. It's actually Berkeley. I know there's no Z in it and stuff like that, but trust me, my friend went there, and he said it was Berkeley.
All right, let's move on to, I'm sorry.
Used to think it was Berkeley.
Okay. Please correct. Please forgive me for that. Again, I agree with you. All the reasons that he says that Cruz is more dangerous than Donald Trump. Boy, isn't that what conservatives want? They want somebody who will stand up and denies this idea of man-made climate change, rejects same-sex marriage, wants to abolish the Internal Revenue Service. 3 cheers for that. Believes the Second Amendment guarantees everyone a right to guns. Hello, I think it does. I mean, he's making a great case for Ted Cruz. Let's go on to number 2.
The next thing he's going to tell us is that, Ted Cruz believes that free speech and freedom of religion means that you get to say what you think and worship as you please. I mean, perish the thought.
Perish the thought.
So, anyhow, but he goes on for number 2 is, he says, Cruz is a true believer. And then he points out that, this is his language, he says, Trump has no firm principles except making money, getting attention, and gaining power. But Cruz really does detest the federal government and has spent much of his life embracing radical right economic and political views, like the ones we just described.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact the IRS shouldn't be able to step on you, the fact that you should be able to own a gun, or, all those kind of radical ideas.
Well, again, I bring up this article because I think Robert Rice is making a terrific case for Ted Cruz, that he is a true believer. He detests the federal government. My God, isn't what the Tea Party is all about, or part of what the Tea Party was all about? Taxed enough already, smaller government, taking back our rights from government, or limiting the rights, or stopping the limit of our rights that government puts on us. Again, in my opinion, a great case for Donald Trump. I'm sorry, for Ted Cruz. And he says here, Trump has no firm principles except making money, gaining attention, and gaining power.
Yeah, I mean, that would give me pause. If that's an accurate statement of what's making Donald Trump tick, then that scares me, because that's not what I would be interested in. That's not what the Founding Fathers were interested in. If you look at the kind of people that, you look at George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
George Washington made money. He was very wealthy, but that wasn't all he was about, and nobody would really say that that's what he was about. Or getting attention. He was not about getting attention.
No.
And he certainly wasn't about acquiring power. He was prepared to walk away from power multiple times because he wasn't really comfortable with the idea that one person should have a lot of power. And it was only until his political adversaries talked him into running a second time that he was willing to do it, because he felt like, being the president for 2 terms might be too much.
Well, what George Washington did was unprecedented. He gave up the power twice, George. Once was at the end of the Revolutionary War. He turned in his resignation. There were some people who wanted to make him king, and he refused to do that. He stepped away. He also stepped away at the end of his second term. And there weren't term limits on the presidency at that time, George. George Washington made the decision to give up the power. In fact, it was Napoleon who said, they wanted me to be another Washington. They wanted me to be another general who wins all the battles and then steps away from ruling. And that was,
he couldn't do that.
No, he couldn't. Hey, George, let's take a quick break, and we'll start our break a little early, come back and do the other 3. And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1316 Philly. Around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, rebooting Liberty Radio, and AM/FM 24/7. Avoid disappointment and future regret. Don't go away. George and I will be back in about 2 minutes.
I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm messy, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos Radio Network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Biden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to Conservative Commandos Radio Show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. And for rebroadcast, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com. Mornings at 9 a.m., log on to Leading Edge Radio Network. At 1 p.m., roarradio.net. At 9 p.m., highplainsdailynews.com. Or you can hear our show any time of the day by calling 832-999-1199. You don't need an app. You don't need to download anything. Just call 832-999-1199. George, you and I are discussing an article by Robert Reich. He's the former labor secretary for Bill Clinton, where he says 5 reasons Ted Cruz is even more dangerous than Donald Trump, and we're down to number 3.
Absolutely. Number 3, he's smarter, referring to Senator Cruz. He said, so Cruz is smarter. He says Trump is no slouch, but he hasn't given any indication of a sharp mind. And I would agree with that. There's nothing really... if you listen to his speeches, you can often tell kind of what's going on in someone's brain by how they express the thoughts that they're having. And there's no deep thoughts going on in Mr. He doesn't understand. If you ask him to explain the Constitution or the principles of liberty and freedom, he could give you some rudimentary explanation, but it wouldn't be anything deep or compelling. But Mr. Cruz can. Mr. Cruz's explanation of the Constitution and why it's the way it is would be a compelling one, and it would be deep, and it would have a real breadth of understanding and show, something that would be really, at least to a conservative, important. But it's frightening, of course, to Mr. Reich.
Whatever he's grown any since he's no longer secretary. What was he, about 5'2"?
Yeah, I thought he was in some movies. Wasn't he in when they, I don't know. I'm trying to think of, don't they have occasionally need, like, Wookiee, not Wookiees because they're tall. What are those little creatures that are so short in the, look like teddy bears in the
I don't know.
Star Wars movie? I think he played one of those, didn't he?
I'm not sure. It's been so long since I've been to the movies. I don't want to give my money to Hollywood. All right, number 4, George.
Number 4, you have, again, Senator Cruz is more disciplined and strategic. Trump is all over the place, often winging it, saying whatever pops into his mind. Cruz has a clear script and his carefully crafted strategy. He plays the long game. So that's Robert Reich's take on that. Again, you can disagree with Robert Reich. I'm not, he may be right, he may be wrong, but that's his take. Mm-hmm. And I think it's absolutely true that Trump is kind of all over the place. We've seen that on all kinds of issues, whether it's, the idea that we don't need to take in any, first we should take in refugees, then we shouldn't take in refugees, we shouldn't be fighting ISIS, we should bomb the what out of them, a complete 360, or not 360 because I guess he's back where he started, a complete 180.
Yeah, I think also, let's go back to number 3, point number 3, where he says here, talking about Ted Cruz, it says here, for his entire adult life, he has been a fierce debater with an intensely logical debater's mind. And George, I think that's so important when you get into campaigning. I think that's so important when you get into debates with the Democrat candidate. I think we saw this in the last election where Mitt Romney did very, very well in the first debate when he took it to Barack Obama. But in the second and third debate, he played it a little too safe. And he didn't, right. And he did not do well in the debates, and I think that's what cost him the election. I think that we need a candidate that has a sharp mind, that knows the issues, that knows the Constitution, and is not afraid to use his knowledge to go up against his opponent toe to toe and duke it out.
Agreed. I think that some people would say, the Trumpies would say, of course, that, Trump will take it to anybody. He's not afraid. The answer is he calls people names and he's very aggressive, but he doesn't actually take it to anybody because he doesn't have the mental horsepower to do so. That's why he calls people names. I mean, his big attack on Jeb Bush has been he's low energy. That's not, to me, I think it's actually shameful, and I'm not a Jeb Bush person. I just don't understand. Imagine any of our previous presidents whose entire campaign is calling people stupid and losers. Did you ever hear George W. Bush? He was vilified by so many people. Code Pink. Did he ever get up and say, Code Pink's a bunch of losers. They're a bunch of has-beens. Look at these people. They're just stupid. Did he ever do that? No, he didn't. He just ignored them because he actually has some class. I don't actually, like I said, he's not a rock rib conservative, but there is something immensely childish about the way that Mr. Trump does things. And he is infantile. He speaks on a 5th grade level and he behaves on a 3rd grade level. Think about this. When you ask a preschooler if they like their teacher, they'll say, oh yeah, I like my teacher, she's nice to me, she gives us cookies, whatever. And if they don't like it, it's, oh, the teacher got mad at me because I was misbehaving, so I don't like her. Or the teacher, said I couldn't do this, or, so it's all about the response they're getting from the teacher. Well, what's Donald Trump? He is forever telling us who he likes and doesn't like, and it's always based on what they've said about him. So I know he doesn't like me because I didn't say anything nice about him, but and if I said something nice about him tomorrow, then he'd like me. It's just like, I'm sorry, you're a child. when your child is older and goes to college and you ask them, how do you like your classes, you can tell they've grown up when they say things like, oh, I really like my history teacher because he's really made history alive for me. It's kind of a hard class, but he really knows how to teach history, and I'm excited about the topic now in a way I never was before. That's a different answer. That's not a Donald Trump answer, though. Donald Trump would be, I like him because when every time I say something, he goes, good boy, Donald, that was really smart. As long as you say that and pat him on the head, then he likes you. So, to me, that's not going to do well in a debate because that's not real. Imagine Ronald Reagan. He had all kinds of people criticizing him. Ronald Reagan going, Tip O'Neill's a loser and stupid.
Yeah. Well, I think, George, I think that's what people do.
That's childish.
George, I think that's what people do when they cannot debate the issues. So they go on to the personal attack. I also like what Wright...
To be honest, this is a little bit of a pun here. That's what stupid losers do.
Yeah. I also like what Wright says here about Cruz. He says, Cruz's legal career entailed a sustained use of the courts to achieve conservative ends. He plots his moves carefully. Wow, how important is that? I mean, I think that is huge.
It is. I mean, if you look back on some of the battles Republicans have fought in the last few years, the presidency has a certain power, and occasionally there were just times where we're not going to win every battle. But there are times where I wish that whoever was conducting that battle were thinking about it and plotting and trying to be strategic and not just reacting all the time. So that's a skill set that we could use.
Hey, George, I think the last one, number 5 here, goes to point out that who the insider here is. So would you do number 5, please?
Sure. Cruz is a loner who's willing to destroy institutions. Trump has spent his career using the federal government and making friends with big shots. Not Cruz. Most of his Republican colleagues in the Senate detest him. And Cruz is eager to destroy.
So I have to stop you there, George, and ask the question, who's the insider?
Right. And also, what does Cruz want to destroy? I mean, Cruz doesn't want to destroy your home. He doesn't want to destroy your freedom. He wants to destroy things like an IRS that targets you. He wants to destroy laws which unfairly sap from you opportunity and freedom and make it so that you and your children can't be successful because you have the weight of big government on your throat. And those are all things again, so he uses kind of charged language because he wants to make Cruz out to be a bad guy. But the reality is, those are things that, Thomas Jefferson wanted to destroy tyranny. That's a good thing.
I think it's
okay to be against tyranny.
George, we can summarize this whole conversation. First of all, think of who's writing this. Robert Reich, a huge liberal, supporter of Bernie Sanders. He was Labor Secretary in Bill Clinton. Think of where this last sentence comes from. Quoting Robert Reich, both men would be disasters for America, but Cruz would be the larger disaster. This comes from Robert Reich.
Again, and why a disaster? It's not because, because when I think of a disaster for America, I don't want that, obviously. But no conservative wants a disaster. But for him, a disaster for America is smaller government, less taxes, more freedom and opportunity. He's listed all the things he thinks are terrible. What a terrible thing to rein in the IRS. That would be a disaster. The idea that you have the right to defend yourself, that's a disaster in his mind if someone were to implant that idea in the hearts of Americans. So this is the point I guess I'm getting at. It's easy for him to throw on words like disaster and all this other stuff, but when you understand where he's coming from, this actually comes across as an endorsement.
There you go. That's exactly the point. Hey, George, that was fun, but let's take a break. You are listening to Conservative Commandos with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, WNJC 1360 in Philly, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, Rebooting Liberty Radio, AM/FM 24/7. Don't go away. On the other side, we're going to be speaking with Gabby Marangelo about Donald Trump and his chances of winning New Hampshire, Iowa, and the Republican nomination. Be right back.
You've heard Paul Deltz playing the music on the Your Music Matters morning show. He is also an experienced mortgage loan officer working for U.S. Mortgage Corporation and assists homeowners navigate the reverse mortgage process. If you are finding yourself asking questions whether or not you set aside enough for retirement, Paul can sit down with you, your family, and your financial advisor and discuss how a reverse mortgage may be a valuable resource for your retirement plan. You will be responsible for paying your taxes and insurance, and the reverse mortgage can help with this and other expenses, such as home health care or other untimely bills. Put Paul's 20-plus years of experience to work for you, as choosing the right option for your situation can be critical. Call Paul at U.S. Mortgage Corporation at 877-213-9977. That's 877-213-9977. Or go to seniormatters.info for more information. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is a licensed mortgage banker in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, and an equal housing lender. NMLS number 3901. U.S. Mortgage Corporation is located at 201 Old Country Road, Suite 140, Melville, New York, 11747. This advertisement applies to first lien mortgages. Paul E. Dilks, NMLS is 485904.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Biden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired, as I am, about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos Radio Network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Hello, this is George Landreth with Rick Trader. You're listening to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show, and if you would like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our websites, www.ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. Also, you can check it in the following morning at 9 a.m. by logging on to leadingedgeradionetwork.com or at 1 p.m. by logging on to roarradio.net. Of course, at 2 p.m. you can log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And now you can listen to Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Well, we have already told you that we have a great, someone who's been following this race closely, a really excellent writer and somebody who's just on top of things. So this is a very interesting conversation. We've got Gabby Morangello, who is a political reporter at the Washington Examiner. I think I've told our listeners I'm a big fan of the Washington Examiner. They do great work there. She's previously worked as a reporter for Campus Reform, which, of course, tries to hold academia responsible and keep them accountable. Gabby, welcome to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show.
Thanks so much for having me on, and what a lovely introduction.
You've written an interesting article. It's entitled "Trump Solidifies New Hampshire Lead with 2 weeks left." Just give us the lay of the land, if you will. We've been snowed in, socked in, and we want to hear what people in the know are saying about what's going on in New Hampshire, which of course will be the second primary state, with Iowa being the first caucus state. And so I guess technically then New Hampshire is the first primary state, but it's the second event, if you will, in the nomination process.
Right. Well, as he stands right now in New Hampshire, Donald Trump has pretty much solidified the fact that he is a front runner, not just nationally, but in this first-in-the-nation primary state. He is consistently polled in the top tier. He's over 30% now, and roughly 75% of people who say they plan to support him in the upcoming primary are firmly backing Donald Trump. So, they're not on the fence. They're not considering another candidate like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. They are all in for Donald Trump, and they're eager to cast their ballots in the upcoming primary. He was just here last night at an event here at a local high school, and he continued to draw out about 1,000 voters, and this is in a really small town here in New Hampshire. So he is still as much a celebrity in this race as he was the day he entered it, and it's going to be really interesting to see, particularly due to all of the speculation, how many of his supporters actually show up to vote on February 9th.
Right. Now, that's one thing I've heard, is some people say that they won't show up. Others say they will. I have to be honest, I tend to think they will, but I'm just curious, do you have your finger on that pulse, or?
I've gone back and forth on this as well, because I've been to a number of his campaign rallies, not just in New Hampshire, but elsewhere. But here in New Hampshire, there was a rally here about 2 weeks ago in the middle of a blizzard, and he still drew about 250 voters who were enthusiastic and passionate about his campaign. But when you actually speak to the people who are there, a number of these people come from out of state, so that's certainly a factor in how many people in New Hampshire are actually planning to support him. And then in addition to that, there's so many voters who show up to his events just for the show. Particularly those who were in that younger electorate. At his event last night at a high school and just last week at another high school, you had a number of first-time voters who just reached the age of 18 or who were, in their early 20s, who came out because they're excited to see Donald Trump, but they're not necessarily excited about some of the comments that he's made or some of the policies that he's put forward. So it's really difficult to tell at this point. I know I've also spoken to a number of pollsters out here who say that, we really can't trust everything that's in the polls. Especially, if that's a lesson, especially we learned in 2012 and 2008. So,
Gabby, sorry to interrupt you, but did you just say the pollsters said you can't believe in the polls?
Yes, I've spoken to a couple pollsters out here who have said, this is a really interesting poll, or this is an outlier, and I don't necessarily believe it. We often speak to people who we survey who admit to just lying or running through their answers just to get the people off the phone on the other line. So that's also something to take note of.
Hey George, I didn't want to interrupt you, and Gabby, but when she said that, I had a laugh. Did I hear right?
Yeah, pollsters telling you the polls can't be trusted. Interesting. Well, now, I do think that this is always the challenge. I always caution people that polling is tough because it's easy to get a sense of what the average American thinks, but what the average voter is going to think is difficult because you have to predict who's going to vote. And if you just ask someone, are you planning on voting? I think for a lot of people what they hear is, are you a good citizen? And so, of course, they say yes, whether or not they're actually going to vote or not. So, on some level, I think that's always the challenge to make our polling correct. We just saw recently in Kentucky that it wasn't. So I guess the news there for our listeners would be, if you're a Trump supporter, then obviously you need to make sure you go out and do your thing. But if you're not a Trump supporter, you're supporting someone else, don't give up hope and think, oh, it's all gone, we can't possibly win, I don't need to bother. Because the reality is, the only poll that actually matters is the one that's held a week from today or 2 weeks from today, depending on which state you're in. If you're it's that the one that matters. So, do you see anything else in the news that would suggest otherwise? I'm just curious.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's something that you're even hearing at events with Donald Trump now. The first thing he says when he gets up on the stage in New Hampshire is a short reminder that people need to get out and vote on February 9th. So it's definitely something his campaign realizes and something that they're constantly reminding voters here of. And I agree with you. I think that a lot of the time when you ask somebody, are you going to go out and support Marco Rubio, or are you going to go out and cast your vote for Ted Cruz, they don't really want to say, well, I have everything going on in my life right now, I'm not really sure. They're just going to say, of course, I plan to vote, because they don't want to, as you mentioned, paint themselves in that as being a poor citizen or not fulfilling their civic duty. So I think there is that tends to skew a little bit more towards the fact that there are a lot of people who say that they will hit the voting booth for Donald Trump, but may not necessarily turn out on voting day.
Right. And that would be true of anybody else, quite frankly. Who else is kind of, to the extent we're watching a horse race, and Donald Trump, if you were calling the race right now, it sounds like you'd be saying he's leading by several lengths. It's not, he's not leading by a nose. It's not one length or two, but it's a number of lengths. He's way out in front right now. It doesn't mean he's going to win, but it does mean he's way out in front. So the question then is, what do you see? And maybe we should just take a quick break. Can you stay through and answer this question when we come back?
Sure.
Okay, because let me just set up the question very quickly then. So if you're doing the horse race, how are you calling the other players? Who's moving up? Who's falling back? Which horses appear to be gassed and kind of, clearly you're going to be lucky to cross the finish line, much less place or, show or whatever. So with that question, we will be right back to you. We're coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, which is our flagship station in Philadelphia. And, of course, we're also coming to you around the world on the Internet with CPR Worldwide Media, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and Rebooting Liberty Radio Network. And, of course, AM/FM 24/7.
They say I'm crazy, I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty,
Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Hi, this is Bob Vide, owner of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. I've had the opportunity to travel in many foreign countries, and I've seen what happens to people when they lose their freedom. I wrote this poem. Give us freedom was the cry as they marched throughout the night. At Concord Bridge in Trenton, for freedom they would fight. To build a nation that would last with peace and liberty, it is a job that's never done if we are to be free. They wrote a declaration to announce that we are free, then a constitution for all the world to see. But this is ink on paper. We must make it last. It must always be defended, and that is quite a task. Today the battle rages for freedom in our land. To save our Constitution, we all must take a stand. We must stand up for freedom in our actions every day, and you can stand up with us. Join the NRA. This is Bob Viden of Bob's Little Sports Shop in Glasper, New Jersey. You may call us at area code 856-881-7575 or visit us online at bobslittle.sportshop.com.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back. This is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Rick Trader, and I'm the co-host, George Landreth. We, of course, hope that you'll be willing to listen to rebroadcasts. Listening once isn't quite enough, so please check out our websites, www.ccrsnetwork.com and www.ccrshow.com. And in the mornings at 9 a.m., you can log on to leadingedgeradionetwork.com, or at 1 p.m., you can log on to www.roarradio.net. At 2 p.m., log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And now you, of course, can listen to Conservative Commandos from any phone by dialing 832-999-1199. Gabby, thanks for holding over for us. Just give us a real quick rundown of how you see this horse race. That was the question I kind of led at you with going into the break. And then I want to get to two of your other articles that you've written recently that I think are very interesting. One is the article about, I think, kind of looking at some of the establishment forces and how they play out and their impact in New Hampshire. And then the other one, of course, is that recent statement about shooting people and supporters not leaving anywhere. I'm just curious if you can mix all that in. But let's go first to the horse race.
Sure. Well, a quick rundown of the horse race in New Hampshire. John Kasich is up here. He just received 2 endorsements in the past 24 hours, one from the Boston Globe, one from the Concord Monitor, and he's doing really well here, and he actually is attracting a number of Democratic-leaning independent voters, left-leaning independent voters who have previously voted for Democratic candidates but are really attracted to his bipartisan message and his track record. So John Kasich is definitely somebody to keep an eye on as he polls in second place and could perhaps even finish in second in New Hampshire. Behind him, there's sort of this three-way battle between Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, and Jeb Bush. I'd say Rubio is a little bit ahead of Christie and Bush right now, and he's definitely accumulating some of Christie's supporters who may prefer Chris Christie's experience and his track record as a governor, but see Marco Rubio as the more electable candidate in a general election. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's really interesting, especially because a Boston Herald poll came out last night that showed that roughly 28% of people who are backing Marco Rubio support him due solely to the fact that they think he's the most electable Republican candidate. And then, as I mentioned, Jeb Bush and Chris Christie are battling it out in that establishment lane. Jeb Bush is really struggling in New Hampshire. He's struggling to not only attract supporters to his town hall events and his campaign events, but to have that enthusiasm that some of the other candidate supporters have.
Interesting. Okay, let's jump to that other article you had written, and it's entitled. Let's see here. Let me double check here. If Trump wins New Hampshire, thank the establishment. Give us the theory behind that, and what caused you to write that article.
Yeah, well, it's something that I noticed the first week that I got here, and that's that all you see on the airwaves here, both on radio and TV, are attack ads between these establishment-friendly candidates. People like Jeb Bush. I mean, Jeb Bush's super PAC, Right to Rise, has been going after Marco Rubio incessantly, and he's been attacking John Kasich, and Rubio has been attacking Christie, and so on and so forth. And so between those four candidates, so much of the focus has been on the political bickering between those four that you have people who are so sick and tired of that type of those types of negative campaign ads and negative campaigning that they're just shifting their support to Donald Trump or in some cases Ted Cruz. But I mean, you have people who never before would have considered supporting a candidate like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz who's outside of that establishment-friendly realm, and now because of this ongoing bickering are saying, to hell with it. I'm going to go back the candidate who's out there saying what's on his mind, and Donald Trump certainly engages in attack frequently, but he's not. That isn't the sole focus of his campaign right now, which is for a number of these other candidates who are trying to break through that establishment lane here in New Hampshire.
He's also managed to somehow create the idea that he only attacks people when they've attacked him, which of course is completely false. He's drawn first blood many times, but I think he has done a good job of creating that impression, and somehow people repeat it and act like that's the truth. And so, for some reason, when you punch back, it's not viewed as controversial. But I find it kind of humorous, quite frankly. Because he's been the guy that's most likely to call names. Most people, to the extent they run negative ads, it's usually based on some perceived policy difference. Sometimes I think they're fairly contrived, obviously, but very few of the. I haven't seen any candidates that just say so and so's a dummy or a stupid or a loser or whatever it is that he calls people.
Right.
But he doesn't. But his ads don't do that. So I think But it's a very interesting thing how he's gotten away with that.
No, it definitely is. I mean, look at his Twitter feed on a daily basis. Nearly, 1 in every 4 tweets is an insult to somebody who hadn't spoken out against him in the last 24 hours. So, just as you mentioned, he creates this idea that he's never the one to draw blood first, but oftentimes he is, and his Twitter is a constant reminder of that. But I
might ask you why you think he does that, because I have my own theory. My theory is it's to disincentivize people from criticizing him. His attitude is, I'm going to have a criticism tax. No other president's ever done that. Ronald Reagan, if you criticized him, he might engage in a debate, but he never called names. And I didn't like Bill Clinton, but he didn't generally call a lot of names either. Certainly George Bush didn't. This is the first person, if he were to become president, who basically apparently is going to, when he has disagreements, just call people stupid and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to do with the image that he's built for himself. I mean, whenever you speak to a Donald Trump supporter, they tell you, I adore the fact that he says what's on his mind and that he's a tough leader and he doesn't take nonsense from other people. So I think that he's just trying to maintain that image, and the best way to do that is to bully other people on the internet. I mean, it's easy to maintain this tough guy image if you're constantly hurling insults and name calling people on a social media platform where you have a viewership of 5 million Americans. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
I have to say, I would have never guessed this would be successful. I would have guessed that behaving, kind of like an elementary school student would be an unsuccessful strategy for achieving the presidency. But, after 6 months of him doing this, whether or not he becomes the nominee is obviously still up for debate. But I wouldn't have predicted he would be as successful as he has been thus far, because it all seems very sophomoric to me. And I would have thought that if nothing else, he'd have to kind of behave more like an adult.
Yeah, well, I would just add
it's funny that he managed to define this as tough. See, I've never defined. If I had a neighbor who every time I walked out, he says, "Hey, you're a loser and stupid," I wouldn't say, "Wow, he's tough." I just say, I just think, "Wow, what a loser himself."
Right,
but somehow he managed to do that. I can't say I understand it, but it's interesting.
Hey, George, George and Gabby, if I could break in, what this reminds me of, I think Donald Trump has taken the tactics of the left, because it seems to be the left that comes out with the name-calling more than people on the right. People on the right want to debate the issues. Seems like people on the left want to call you a loser and stupid. I don't know. This is just a general observation. Gabby, one question if I could ask. If Trump wins Iowa, if Trump wins New Hampshire, does that clear the way for him to run to run out?
Well,
run the gamut?
I think if he wins Iowa and wins New Hampshire, he's certainly going to have a lot of momentum going into South Carolina and Nevada and some of the later states. And he definitely has a strong organization in South Carolina and Nevada, where he's held several campaign rallies and where his stance on the Second Amendment is certainly appreciated and celebrated. So, I mean, if he comes out as
which stance, the most recent one, or the one that he used to have for the previous 60 years of his life?
his most recent stance as a champion for the Second Amendment. But yeah, no, I think if he wins those two early voting states, then he could very likely become the Republican nominee. But again, I just don't see that happening. I think he will do well in New Hampshire, but I'm not so certain yet. I have yet to be convinced that he'll in fact win Iowa.
Run the table is what I meant to say. I couldn't think of the word table. Should be easy for me. Hey, Gabby, we want to thank you for joining us here. Please tell our audience how they can follow your work.
Sure. Well, I'm on the Washington Examiner's website, which is WashingtonExaminer.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GabriellaHope_, and I look forward to joining you guys again, hopefully in the future.
Gabby, I'd love to have you come on just to talk about what it's like to be a reporter up in New Hampshire and to follow these people around.
It's cold.
It's cold. Gabby, again, thanks for joining us. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
George, I want to thank you for sitting in today as my co-host. We're getting short on time, so we have to make a quick break. I also want to thank Robert Knight for being our guest today, Mr. John Forsythe Jr. for working the boards. But for right now, we're out of time. We got to run. We got to go. Take care. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow on the radio.